The 2020 Judicial Candidates Forums are made possible by a partnership between UNC-TV and the North Carolina Bar Association. Tell us about yourself. Your names, both of your names, are known on ballots if you voted. We've seen you, but who are you?
Well, Kelly, first of all, thank you for having us today, and thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation about the North Carolina Supreme Court. I'm Phil Berger, Jr. I'm a judge on the North Carolina Court of Appeals. I grew up here in North Carolina, rural North Carolina, and went to school at UNC Wilmington. I met my wife, Jody, who's a public school teacher. She teaches second grade at the local public school, and we met in Wilmington about 27 years ago now. We've got two great kids. One's a baseball player and student at William Peace University in Raleigh. We just love having him close by. And then my other son is a rising junior, or a junior. He's locked in his room studying and doing the Zoom education right now, but he's an athlete as well, and we're just very proud of our two little boys. I say little, they're grown now, but Jody and I have, we went to law school together. She was teaching and I was in law school at Wake Forest, and then we moved to Eden, where I joined the family practice, the family business with my father and my brother. And then I was elected in 2006 to be the district attorney for Rockingham County. Was fortunate enough to serve 2 terms and was elected president of the North Carolina Conference of District Attorneys. And in that capacity, I worked with prosecutors and law enforcement across the state to improve the administration of justice. I also became an administrative law judge, and your viewers are probably going, what on earth is an administrative law judge? Well, they handle appeals involving state agencies. So Department of Revenue disputes, DEQ disputes, those sorts of things, regulations that impact business, schools, communities. And then in 2016, I was elected to the North Carolina Court of Appeals and now running for a seat on the North Carolina Supreme Court.
And here we are, Lucy Inman. You are experienced as well. Tell us about yourself and what brings you into this race.
Sure. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for having us, and thanks to the North Carolina Bar Association for helping the public know about the judicial candidates. I grew up in Raleigh and went to public schools through high school, and in fact through college and law school. I went to NC State and graduated with a degree in English, and my first job out of college was working as a newspaper reporter, which was just a wonderful job because you had a responsibility to meet people from all walks of life and really try to find out the truth by gathering information from all sides. When I was working as a newspaper reporter, I covered courts, and it was there I realized there was something going on I wanted to be involved in. Most people in court are not there because they're having a good day. It's really where humanity meets government. I decided I wanted to go to law school and went to North Carolina, UNC North Carolina at Chapel Hill, graduated from there, and my first job out of law school was working as a law clerk to then Chief Justice Jim Exum. From there, I met my husband during that work. He was a newspaper reporter, and he wanted to go to film school in Los Angeles. I knew it was true love when I agreed to take another state bar, and we moved there and lived there for 8 years where I practiced. And when we had our oldest child and one on the way, I said we need to come back to North Carolina, and we did. I then practiced in North Carolina for several years and first became a Superior Court judge in 2010. I used to say, have gavel, will travel, because I held court in counties all across our state in matters ranging from driving while impaired cases to first-degree murder to complicated business disputes. I was elected to the Court of Appeals in 2014 and really love my job there because I get to continue the search for truth and work with writing.
I'll follow that up. You want to be on the Supreme Court as an Associate Justice. Most people know it's about opinion writing. That's what makes the headlines, but we've partnered with some retired judges. They have some ideas for questions, and one they wanted me to ask was, what other important functions of an Associate Justice or quality do you think are important besides the simple, not so simple, but the simple act of issuing opinion? What other qualities?
Well, the first quality that comes to my mind is listening. Judges need to listen to the arguments that are made. Judges need to read. There are tremendous number of briefs that justices need to read. And in order for a judge to render a fair and impartial decision, it's really important that you listen and keep an open mind and learn as much as you can about each side of the case. So that is one of the most important functions.
Mr. Berger, what qualities do you think an associate justice would need to bring to the bench to be highly effective?
Well, I think one of the main things that any judge needs is an operating system, right? What is your default position on interpreting statutes and interpreting the law? So you know, a real contrast in some of these judicial races is interpretive theory. I'm an originalist and a textualist. I believe that the legislature passed a law with certain intent and certain meaning. And if the words on the page are clear and unambiguous, judges don't substitute their will or their judgment for that of the legislature or that of the previous court that handed down the law. That's just inappropriate, and that's judicial activism. So what is the operating system behind the judge? And for me, it's originalism and textualism.
What factors would you consider in deciding whether to dissent, bearing in mind that unlike the Court of Appeals, a dissent on the Supreme Court has no immediate effect? That came straight from a judge. I cannot claim that one.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, right? If you're in the minority on the North Carolina Supreme Court, what purpose does a dissent serve? And if you believe Justice Scalia, right, one of the things you need to consider is who's your audience, right? And for me in my writing, my audience is always the single mom who wonders, am I getting my child support? The defendant who's sitting in jail wondering, what's going to happen with my sentence? You know, because in those situations, it's often difficult for the attorney to get into custody to talk with the defendant in a timely fashion after an opinion is handed down. Same with the single mother waiting on child support. I mean, those are time-consuming. It takes time to do. So I think if you look at who's your audience, and for me, it's those individuals. So if a case has gone against that single mom or against that criminal defendant, a clear, short, concise explanation of why the majority may or may not have hit on all points is very important. And then also to set up certain appeals. You know, the Attorney General's office has the ability to appeal certain items if there's a federal hook to the case, and the ability to write a dissent in an appropriate way so that the Attorney General then has the ability to make a good decision on whether or not to take the case to federal court.
Ms. Inman, I'll ask you the same question. What factors would you consider in deciding whether to dissent if you're an associate justice?
Well, you know, some of the factors that I consider now are, am I going to lose sleep at night because I agreed with something that troubled me and honest analysis told me is not right? You must dissent. Justices must go on the record if they cannot agree with the majority opinion. And that holds true whether or not it has any immediate consequence or not. Dissenting is also a way of letting the person who is waiting to see if they're going to continue serving a prison term or have some relief, or waiting to see if they're going to get the justice as they've seen it that they deserve, to let them know that there's a different voice and a different view about that very, very important case. Cases don't get to the North Carolina Supreme Court unless they are pretty difficult questions or unless there was a dissent at the Court of Appeals. And it's not surprising that among 7 justices as opposed to 3 judges at the Court of Appeals, there's more likelihood that there's going to be a difference of opinion. The other function that dissents can serve, and Judge Berger mentioned in that individual case that might have a federal aspect that gets appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, but dissents also contribute to the fabric of our jurisprudence, Justice Exum, who I clerked for right out of law school, wrote several dissents, and some of them were then later quoted by the United States Supreme Court. And so they really inform the law, even though they are not binding.
We have about 1:45, believe it or not. Let's wrap this up. You get to speak to the voters one time in this video recorded interview. What do you say to them, and why should they consider your candidacy for Supreme Court?
Well, Kelly, again, thank you for having us, and certainly thank you to UNC-TV for the opportunity to be here today. This election comes down to really one thing: interpretive theory. Are you, as a voter, willing to cast your vote for someone who will apply the law as written, or do you want to vote for someone who perhaps has an interpretive theory that's living document, that is like a sailboat with no rudder? And that's what this election comes down to. Also, law and order. Right? As a former district attorney, I'm the only former elected DA on the North Carolina Court of Appeals. I would be the only former elected DA on the North Carolina Supreme Court. And I think with all that's going on in society now, it's that type of experience that we need. And law and order is such a big issue in all of our communities now. And I hope the voters take that into account.
By coin flip, Ms. Inman, you have the last word of this segment.
Very well. I have enjoyed my job, treasured my job as an appellate judge for the last 6 years and trial judge for 4 years before that. I'm running for this seat on the North Carolina Supreme Court to protect our court system from partisan ideology that I believe threatens the fairness and the independence of our courts. You can hear calls for law and order and law and order and law and order, and I certainly believe in law and order. And my judicial philosophy is based on respect for the rule of law and respect for precedent. With the great divides in our nation right now and the great disruption, the most important role of the judiciary is to keep our democracy stable. And to do that, we need judges who will not go into the job with any agenda to interpret a statute or any other authority in any particular way. We need fair and impartial judges that will keep our law and order for every member of our society.
Thank you, and good luck to you both. The 2020 Judicial Candidates Forums are made possible by a partnership between UNC-TV and the North Carolina Bar Association.